Somebody says, is it normal to have some physical discomfort during the practice, for example, nausea? Yes, it is. I give very, very detailed answers on the frequently asked questions, and they are also time-stamped. I'm going to just say a little bit about that. Nausea is a common sign of release. So any kind of tension or nervous system or trauma release can be accompanied by nausea. So that's a fairly common thing to happen. There's, of course, also motion that can do something with the ears and things like that. It also can have to do with energy moving up the front surface of the body. In the frequently asked questions, I give like a whole bunch of different strategies around that. That's very normal, and that actually means you practiced well. I would drink lots of water and maybe some mint or ginger tea now, just so you get kind of settled. Okay, let's see. In the shaking part, when stretching, do we still need to be moving? Yes, you always need to be moving. You shouldn't be still, because then you arrest your body's ability to do something. So shaking can be just, you know, shaking things out, or shaking like this, or you can, you know, kind of stretch your body and shake, but you definitely want to keep on moving. And then somebody says they had nausea but no feeling attached. Ideally, you don't have much feeling attached to it, or thoughts, because you're just allowing the body to take care of business without having to engage in the drama of it. So that's fairly common, that there's nausea, there's shaking, there's all kinds of stuff, but there isn't really content. And that's actually what you want, so that it washes out instead of re-engaging you. And then somebody is saying, I find myself stuck in sadness so often. Tears keep coming during my practice. Feel stuck in sadness, anger, frustration, even though wondrous things are happening in my life. I've been doing this type of movement work for a few months and yoga for several years. Well, here's the thing. The things that you're feeling are always there. So what I mean by that is, when you do movement practice or somatic movement practice, and not all movement practices are the same. You know, some stir things up, but you still need to move them out by either doing other practices or working with therapy or working with somatic modalities. But in general, when you have a lot of strong emotions happening, these are emotions that are in there. So they're not just being pulled out of thin air, so to speak. It's just often we don't allow ourselves to feel them. So the best strategy in that case is usually, or the only strategy really, is they say the only way out is through. And that means taking some concentrated time to actually work with it. It's useful to have somebody to guide you at that point, and really help you facilitate popping out the other side. If you need some referrals or things like that, I have a few good people, both on the bodily domain as well as the more talk process domain.
I have a question about visualization. So today when I was doing my practice, I had a lot of visuals, and they were quite specific, and I went with them. So I kind of imagined what it was like, something inside of my body, but more than that, I had it also in another occasions, and I kind of focused on them quite a lot. And then I wanted to ask you if that's what you recommend, or would you rather recommend going into your body?
Well, my recommendation is always to not interfere with what's happening. That's always my recommendation. So unless it's really pulling you out of the practice, I would say go with whatever arises. I'm hyper visual, like my entire world's very, very visual. And so when I do nonlinear, it's like the movies, you know, but my body is still really, really engaged. So I don't interfere with it, but I also don't pay extra attention to one thing over the other. I just let whatever happens happen and just keep on moving. And that will allow the things to, you know, kind of work themselves out of your system without you enforcing one way of processing over another.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I'm enforcing or not. I did feel like I'm influencing it sometimes, but it was hard. Like, I don't think it was thinking. I think it just happened.
Yeah. Let it happen. Yeah, I mean, there's, you know, sometimes we want to put our attention somewhere versus other times, but in general, I would just go with whatever happens. That's always a good policy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Usually when I start my practice, I have a lot of sensation that I can move. But once the music keeps going, it's as if the music takes over, the movement takes over, and the sensation diminishes a bit, but I have words floating up. Not sentences, but just words. And then I am not sure, do I now pay attention to try to find the sensation to those, or do I move? So far I've moved as those words, but I'm wondering, how can I get more, or do I just keep going and wait till more sensations show up again?
Yes, don't try and generate something or force it. You have to just, it's very contrary to a lot of modalities, right? When you work with the body and the vagus nerve and the trauma, you know, the trauma systems in the body, you have to kind of unlearn the pushing and the pushing to the edge and the trying to get somewhere and all of those things versus letting unfolding happen. And so, yeah, a word floats up, fine, right? Somebody was saying on here they had visuals of seeing themselves in the cot float by. That's all completely normal and within what the body stores. And the less you direct that or interfere with it, the more things can unfold. Because our body and the way things are stored are so beyond what we cognitively can direct, that if we try and put something on there, it diminishes the ability of the unfolding. So you just go, you know, with it, and whatever happens, happens.
Yep. Great.
Patience.
Thank you. Yeah.
I was wondering, when you asked us to move like completely the opposite as we were moving before, I felt it was very hard to follow what was inside me because of this, you know, because I had to change and I was following something very smooth, and all of a sudden I had to do like that. And I was like, oh, how do I get back to that feeling of following what is inside me?
Yeah.
At some point I realized, oh, but when there is sadness and I usually close up, I could as well open up when I feel sadness. And I went on like that. Is that what you mean?
Yes, that is what I mean. Yes. In general, all suggestions in nonlinear are suggestions. They're not hard and fast orders, right? There to stimulate different inquiry. And so they sit different with each person. And so you always have the freedom to just not follow my instructions, you know? So that's always an option. And sometimes in the confusion of that, you have a learning, right? Because it generates a different kind, you go, wait, oh, and then you've learned something for yourself, and now that's yours. Right? I could not have said, well, you feel sadness, don't close down, open up, because I'm not in your body. But instruction allowed you to figure that out. And now that learning is yours, uniquely yours. And so, as always, when these instructions happen, if they fit, do them. If they don't fit, don't do them. But it's always good to experiment and then discover something. Sometimes I feel the sadness underneath. My partner triggers this deep frustration. I tend to bottle it up. I don't know how to share what's actually going on inside and what I need to share. Any pointers? Well, the first thing is, don't share things till you can actually speak about them in a way that isn't triggered, right? That's really, really important. So what that usually means is when you have a lot of frustration or anger or sadness, it's good to work with it for a while and sit with it for a while till it's cooked enough so that you know what it actually is before it gets blurted out or, you know, vomited out, so to speak. And when that happens and you're not able to articulate things, it is sometimes really good to go and find somebody with whom you discuss these things outside of your partner, a therapist, a somatic experiencing practitioner, somebody like that, so that you give voice to the feeling. And by giving voice to the feeling, once again, you're being empowered to take all of these parts of you into account and honor them before you actually go to your partner, which is important. Otherwise, when it's this half-cooked stuff, your partner can't do anything with it, and then they're more likely to reject it, and then it's even more frustration on both of your accounts. That's not to say that eventually you don't want to talk about it, but it's good to have hatched the emotion, so to speak, before actually putting it out there. Moving as love, I found that so much as I reached for what that felt like, I kept ending up feeling intense sadness, as it seemed all my deep loves are connections which have great grief attached. I did get flashes of a more pure, freer love underneath. Do you have suggestions how to reach beneath that story and entrain on the pure feeling of love? The only way to do that is to kind of move through, as always, but also it's really, really important to know that all love has grief attached to it, right? There is no such thing as loving without losing. Even if you don't lose the person to a breakup, you will lose that person eventually to old age, death, sickness, estrangement, you know, all kinds of things. So the very act of loving fully has the grief of the loss of that depth of love attached to it. And that's a bit different than grieving the loss of someone that you haven't grieved fully. So it's understanding both the letting go of the grief to feel the purer appreciation for that relationship, but it's also understanding that as you do open your heart, there is more grief and there is beautiful kind of a sadness that comes from loving so deeply. And that's why often you can really feel it here. It's almost like a pain that goes out into the arms and hands. And that's why I suggested feeling the arms and the hands and the palms, you know, like the palms as if like you have a heart here, and the fingertips and all of that, and work with that, because that particular kind of motion of the hands and the arms and the fingers, it is an extension of the heart. And when you do that, you can actually feel, and there is a sadness and a longing, but it can be very beautiful and really infuse the body with a lot of openness. And so that's one way that you can play with it as well, with the body. This explanation of yours about the grief was, we feel along with the love. For me, when I started moving as love, I felt real intimacy with me, yes. And I know what this is all about. And suddenly I felt a void, a big emptiness, which made me feel a bit lost. Yes, that can happen. But as you do that, that void, that fills with everything. So there are stages to that. You might have a moment where you just are so wide that it feels like you don't have a lot of content. It's a little bit like if you have a container with a gas in it, and then you make the container bigger, the gas molecules spread out further. And so then it feels a bit like there isn't much in there. that's not a problem. On the contrary, that's actually very good. In the shamanic states, that's often called the hollow tube, the emptying out. In the work that we do, we call it contentless. There's an entire practice around that, where you have a moment where you're just so spacious, it feels like you're not constituted the way you usually are. And so when that happens and you feel lost, if you just relax, then the next thing that happens is the entire universe rushes in, so to speak, to fill that void. And so you have this extreme sense of emptiness and this extreme sense of fullness. It's very, very beautiful, and also very, very trippy. So I would definitely say go with it and let that happen without, bracing against it. Somebody's saying, I found myself getting lost in thought very often. Any tips to stay connected to my body sensation? When you do get into a lot of thought, there's a few things that you can consider. One is you just wear that down, meaning you just keep on going till that drops. Often our head is very active, and it's not good to suppress that. I sometimes, when I'm in really, really intense creative phases, like I'm writing right now, and so my mind gets really, 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 like I write all night long while I'm sleeping, even things like that, phrasing things. So when I then do nonlinear, I can't actually do much other than move and write. And then what I do often is I either record myself, I speak it out, or I even write it down on a notepad till my mind slows down. So that's one option to go. The other one is to just really focus into the body, always coming from the back, from the thought back into the body, feeling the body move, feeling your clothing on your skin moving. Or the third option is you can move as the thoughts. So whatever thoughts you have, move your body as the thoughts. And then that brings a somatic component to your movement as well.